Conduirà l'acte Anna Maillo, graduada en Publicitat i Relacions Públiques per la Universitat Pompeu Fabra.
Bona tarda. Buenas tardes. Good afternoon. Benvinguts, graduats i graduades. Us saludem i us agraïm la vostra presència avui, aquí, i saludem els familiars i els amics que us han acompanyat al campus. També, com no podia ser d'altra manera, a tots els familiars, amics i membres de la comunitat universitària que ens seguiu a través d'internet. Bienvenidos, graduados y graduadas. Os saludamos y agradecemos vuestra presencia hoy aquí y saludamos a los familiares, amigos que os han acompañado hasta el campus. También, como no podía ser de otra forma, a todos los familiares, amigos y miembros de la comunidad universitaria que nos siguen a través de Internet. Welcome, graduates. We greet and thank you for being here today and with the family and friends who have accompanied you to campus. And finally, we greet all the family, friends, and members of the university community who are following us on the internet. We would like to inform you that throughout the ceremony, we will be using the 3 universities' official languages, Catalan, Spanish, and English, so that all of those in attendance can follow it. Os informamos que a lo largo del acto utilizaremos los 3 idiomas oficiales de la universidad, el catalán, el castellano y el inglés, para que todos los asistentes puedan seguirlo fàcilmente. Us informem que al llarg de l'acte farem servir els 3 idiomes oficials, el català, el castellà i l'anglès, perquè tots els assistents puguin seguir-lo fàcilment. Una vegada fet aquest apunt, passem a celebrar, ara sí, l'acte acadèmic de graduació dels estudis de Màster en Dret de la Universitat Pompeu Fabra. I els que rebreu el diploma en aquesta sessió sou els graduats i graduades en Màster en Criminologia i Execució Penal, Màster avançat en Ciències Jurídiques i Màster en European and Global Law. Començarem l'acte sol·licitant la presència del doctor Ángel Rodrigo, director del Departament de Dret de la Universitat Pompeu Fabra, al qual us adreçarà unes paraules. Estàs convidat a l'escenari.
Buenas tardes, good afternoon. Bienvenidos en nombre del Departamento de Derecho a este acto de graduación. Bienvenidos estudiantes, bienvenidos familiares, bienvenidos profesores y demás personal de la Universidad Pompeu Fabra que colabora en la realización de esta ceremonia. Me gustaría compartir con todos ustedes 2 reflexiones. La primera gira alrededor de una imagen, gira alrededor de comparar el máster con un viaje real y un viaje imaginario, un viaje figurado para realizar vuestro máster. Un viaje real e imaginario que ha llegado a buen puerto. No es el final, es un puerto intermedio y esperamos que tanto el viaje real como el viaje figurado a través de los conocimientos, a través de los encuentros, a través de las prácticas, haya sido un viaje verdaderamente provechoso. Esperamos que este máster haya sido un viaje provechoso. Como decía el gran poeta griego Constantín Cavafis, lo importante es no tanto el destino como el viaje. Lo importante es el viaje, la realización de vuestro máster, y esperamos que en ese viaje os haya llenado de dones y de sabiduría. La segunda reflexión que quiero compartir gira alrededor de la propia universidad, de la Universidad Pompeu Fabra. Desde el primer día de su fundación, esta universidad quiere ser una universidad catalana abierta al mundo. ¿Y esto qué significa? Significa que es una universidad que estando en Barcelona, que estando en Cataluña, está abierta al mundo. Significa que quiere ser una especie de hub del conocimiento científico, que quiere ser un espacio público en el que lleguen las ideas, que estas ideas sean expuestas, que sean debatidas, que sean compartidas y que sean diseminadas. Significa que pretendemos que este sea un espacio para lo que en inglés se llama la cross-fertilization de las ideas y del conocimiento. Y significa que queremos participar en la conversación científica global y contribuir a difundir y a crear el conocimiento científico. Con ese objetivo os doy la bienvenida en nombre del Departamento de Derecho a este acto de graduación. One moment. Good afternoon. Now in English. Welcome on behalf of the Law Department of this graduation ceremony. Welcome students, family members, professors, and other Pompeu Fabra staff who collaborate in carrying on this ceremony. I would like to share with you two reflections, briefly. The first one is the image, the Master as a journey. A journey, real a figurate journey to make your Master in Barcelona. This journey has arrived to Harvard. It's not the end. It's not the end. It's a middle point. In this journey, we hope that the real and figurate journey through the contents, through the relationship with your colleagues, we hope that this journey has been useful for you. The great poet Constantin Cavafy said that the important is the journey, not only the destination. The important is that the realization, the journey, the realization of your Master has filled you with gifts and wisdom. The second reflection that I want to share with you is the Pompeu Fabra as a Catalan university open to the world. And what does mean this qualification? This qualification as a Catalan university open to the world mean that it's a university that stays in Barcelona, in Catalonia, but is open to the world. It's more or less a half of the scientific knowledge. For this, we know that the Pompeu Fabra University won't be a public space where the ideas arrive, are exposed, are debated, are disseminated, are criticized. We intend the cross-fertilization of ideas and knowledge. We want to participate with this approach in the global scientific knowledge, the global scientific conversation, and contribute to dissemination and creating scientific knowledge. Welcome on the behalf of the Law Department to this graduation ceremony. Thank you.
Gracias. El acto continúa con la lección de graduación a cargo del profesor Roger Michael O'Keefe. Professor Roger Michael O'Keefe is a full professor of international law at Bocconi University. Previously, he taught at University College London, and before that, he spent 15 years at the University of Cambridge, where he was a senior lecturer in law, deputy director of the Law Department Centre for International Law, and a fellow and dean of Magdalene College. In 2015, he was a distinguished visiting professor at Pompeu Fabra University, and we have the privilege of having him again today. His graduation lecture is entitled International Criminal Justice and the War in Ukraine. Please come along. Thank you.
Just forgive me, a bit of water. Well, it's an enormous pleasure to be back here, at Pompeu Fabra, where I had such a wonderful time. I feel almost inadequate standing up here in front of you. And part of that inadequacy is because where I've taught all this time, we haven't really had graduation ceremonies. So I did my Masters at Cambridge. And at Cambridge, when you get your degree, you basically go to an old hall and someone in a funny outfit is there. No speeches, no nothing. They call your name and they give you the thing, okay? And I was number 2 in the list. My family came all the way from Australia. And others had come from South America and this, that, and the other. And afterwards, I heard every family having the same conversation. You made us come all this way just for that? So it was a complete waste of their time. So hopefully, I make it somewhat worth your while to be here. So I've chosen what, in hindsight, is not a very cheerful topic. I could have chosen something happier, I guess, although I blame Josep, who told me to choose something about international criminal law, because, of course, some of you are criminologists and others of you have done aspects of international law. And what more topical thing is there than the war in Ukraine? Now, my mother's side of the family, as I was explaining to Josep, are from the former Yugoslavia. They're from the islands of Croatia. And we used to go to Yugoslavia lots. And I have a photo of my mother standing outside the old town of Dubrovnik, and a photo of my father in the town of Knin, where 6 months later, surface-to-surface missiles slammed into the city. And 6 months later in Knin, 30,000 people were driven from their homes. And this was a shock to me because this was a normal country. This was a country where I recognized the people, where my family lived. And I feel that the war in Ukraine is, to your generation, I mean the students, what the war in the former Yugoslavia was to mine. Because 1 minute you have a successful country, functioning, young people, creative people, beautiful cities, and so on and so forth. And within the space of 4 weeks, we have smoking ruins. We have people murdered in basements. We have systematic sexual assault and so on. Just like that. Just like that. And I find this a traumatic thing, and so I decided to try to process this through thinking about it through the lens of international criminal law. And indeed, it was the war in the former Yugoslavia that got me into international criminal law, on which I've worked on for a very long time. I want to briefly describe 5 striking things, 5 noticeable things about the war in Ukraine, the things I think that make us, in some ways, sit back. And then I want to discuss a little bit deeper as to what some of these things tell us about the so-called project of international criminal law. And when I talk about international criminal law and international criminal justice, I'm talking about 2 things, really. The prosecution of suspected criminals for international crimes, war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide, aggression, either in an international court, like the International Criminal Court, or in a national court. For example, the courts of Ukraine, the courts of Germany, France, even Spain. But what we're talking about here are crimes under international law. So the first part will be descriptive and the second part will be reflective. Well, in terms of what is striking, I think, about the war in Ukraine, the very first thing is the nature of the crimes, by which I do not mean murders, rapes, etc. Since, I guess, the 90s and beforehand, of course, we've had lots and lots of these events, but usually the crimes have been committed by non-state groups, by militias driven by some ideology, for example, Islamic State. And usually they have tried to disguise what they are doing. What is so shocking to me, from the point of view of international criminal law, about the war in Ukraine is the completely blatant state policy behind all of it. What we don't have is one community fighting with another community over, either some ideological issue or over resources or something. We have the premeditated invasion by one head of state and his armies of another state. This is the sort of thing we we haven't seen, at least on the European continent, for a very long time. Now that constitutes the crime of aggression. What's going on constitutes a range of war crimes. What's so striking about the way the war is being fought is that the targeting of civilians is utterly part of the policy. The whole plan is to kill as many civilians as possible and to drive the rest of them out. The other striking thing is deportations. The last time we heard about deportations in this area was Stalin. Up to 1 million people so far have been deported to Russia, from Ukraine, to Russia. So for me, that's the first striking thing, is yes, we've seen lots of international crimes before, but this is top-down from a state against another state, as if to say to everyone else, I don't care what you think. What you think and what you've told us these past 50 years, screw you. That's basically it. It's a defiance of the world. The second striking thing is the reaction. 42 states referring the matter to the International Criminal Court. 42 states, including South American states, Japan, Australia, etc., etc. So we're not just talking the United States, we're not just talking France, etc., etc. 33 states in the UN Human Rights Council, including a range of Arab states, a whole lot of African states, referring the situation. Now, it has to be said, there's fine print here, China voted against an inquiry. India abstained, etc. But nonetheless, the international reaction to it, and it's something I'll talk about later, there seems to have been a very general, I wouldn't say universal, but a general sense of revulsion and the thought that something has to be done. And what's interesting is that the something that they think of is the criminal law. Something that they think of is prosecuting these people. The third striking thing has been what might be called the democratization of international criminal justice. So far I've been talking about states, what states have been doing. The extraordinary thing that is happening right now in terms of evidence gathering in relation to Ukraine is the involvement of everyday people, of private people. So the International Criminal Court, very early on, opened a portal in which you and I can upload evidence. Now, obviously, not all of this is going to be admissible evidence because there's going to be all sorts of issues in relation to it. Nonetheless, everyday people in Ukraine can catalogue and can document the crimes that have happened to their families, and that material can go directly to the International Criminal Court. Now, as I said, there are issues, and we'll talk about them perhaps a bit afterwards. Further private involvement, a private initiative which ended up in the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe to establish a special tribunal for the crime of aggression, the actual invasion. Personally, I don't think it's a good idea, but nonetheless, it shows that private parties have become invested in what, until relatively recently, has been considered a matter of states, a matter of international organizations. What's been exceptionally striking has been the involvement of something that I've since discovered gets called the online community. I don't know, everything seems to be a community here. I tend to think, I don't think of people online as in a community, but there seems to be something called an online community. A lot of the evidence being gathered is being gathered by very expert organizations through open source material and who are already trained in advance to document. So there is a group called Bellingcat. The name comes from a cat with a bell around its neck so that you hear it when it's there. You don't see the cat, but you hear it. Their job is, through incredible algorithmic studies, to find all this open source material and to provide it with real-time evidence and this, that, and the other to document crimes. They've done it in Syria, they've done it in a range of other places, and they know how to do it. The involvement of people who track Twitter, all these sorts of things, the online community. And then finally, of course, everyday Ukrainian NGOs, and some of them have already been trained in advance, a group called Truth Hounds, pre-prepared, because in 2014, of course, the war started there, to document and evidence all this material. Okay, so again, investment, but this time of private persons. The fourth striking thing, and I've already alluded to it, is the technology involved. These days, it seems investigating crimes isn't just about, you know, Columbo and all these shows. My mother and father just used to watch detective shows, you know, pretty much endlessly. My father was an intellectual, he was a lawyer and all this sort of thing, but he loved reading spy things, and he and my mother just seemed to watch detective shows, including Inspector Montalbano. But it's not like that. So there are people tracking Twitter. So the Five Eyes intelligence community, okay, the most high-tech tracking devices in the world, can read people's phones. So now they have evidence from the people themselves who committed them because they took photos and sent them to their family, sent them to their friends. They got rid of them 5 minutes later, but that's left a trace. Super high-tech stuff going on. And then the final striking thing is the use of international criminal law on the Russian side. The counter-narrative. So what we're used to seeing is denial. If a state or a non-state group is involved in these sorts of acts, usually their, what you might call media strategy, is simply to deny. But what the Russians have done is something else, is that they have taken the mantle of the Nuremberg trial, because of course who presided over the Nuremberg trial? 4 states, including the Soviet Union. And the whole discourse of the denazification, etc., 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 their message is, and this was said just a week ago on national TV, that we are the sole heirs of the Nuremberg tradition, and our special operation in Ukraine is to sanctify that memory, to purge the place of Nazis, etc., etc. Actually using what had been a sort of shared, a sort of universal discourse built around the destruction of Nazi forces in Europe and the prosecution and eventually execution of most of the leadership, and have turned it around on their side, Now that also tells us something about the power of the idea of international criminal justice, that they don't negate the Nuremberg tradition, but rather say that they're the heirs. Okay, well, some brief reflections, because I don't want to keep you too long. I want to focus on some of the academic reaction to this, and I want to focus on what much of what's going on might tell us about the why of international criminal justice. So I'm going to reflect on the how of international criminal justice, how we go about it, and then I'm going to reflect on why. Why do we do these things? Why do we prosecute people for war crimes and crimes against humanity? Why don't we just shoot them in the head? Or why don't we just shake hands and say, let's forget about it? Which has been done, of course, in places. So the first thing I want to focus on is the following. There has been an accusation, as there tends to be in international criminal law, that what's going on is the selective use of international criminal law. In other words, war crimes and these things go on all around the world. Why are people obsessing over this? Okay. So, one of my former colleagues, I won't mention names and I won't mention university, but published a blog in which he said that the desire to prosecute the Russian high leadership for invading Ukraine is, quote, sociopathic gaslighting, unquote. And his argument was, you did nothing about Syria. And this is the argument all the time. Why this and why not that? Why this and why not that? One of the accusations has been Eurocentrism. The idea that, well, you only really care when, putting it exceptionally bluntly, as this former colleague put it, you only really care when white people are killed, when Europeans are killed. Well, I think the Eurocentric argument can be destroyed on many levels. One of them, just look at the states that have actually referred the matter to the International Criminal Court and that opened an investigation in relation in the UN Human Rights Commission. A whole lot of Arab states, a whole lot of African states, etc., etc. But let's leave that to one side. Let's think of the history of international criminal justice since the 90s. More than $1 billion US, 1 billion, was spent on the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda. Hundreds of millions of dollars were spent on the Special Court for Sierra Leone. The accusation in relation to the International Criminal Court until recently is that they are prosecuting only African people. And yet now the accusation is one of Eurocentrism. Look at the facts. The UN has put hundreds of millions into prosecuting the former leaders of the Khmer Rouge. And the accusation as to why did you not do this in Syria? The answer is obvious. Because Russia vetoed 18 resolutions in the UN Security Council preventing this. So it seems to me that that Eurocentric argument is just simply itself denying the facts. On the other hand, I think there is a good argument in relation to the following. The idea that somehow this is being instrumentalized. In other words, it's not just about punishing people for gross things, that it's all part of the propaganda campaign, and I mean propaganda not necessarily in a negative sense, but just in the sense of binding people together in the war effort, led by the US and the NATO states. And there is unfortunately optics, as the Americans call it, around this, which lends itself to that argument. The Americans and some others, including the Australians, illegally invaded Iraq. There was no prosecutions in relation to that. The Americans are not themselves parties to the statute of the International Criminal Court, etc., etc. So I think there is no doubt that this is part of a message in the war, but I don't think that that takes away from the nobility of the aim or indeed the necessity of the thing. The fact of the matter is there is realpolitik. The fact of the matter is that the high interests of states are always involved in these things. And I tend to think that we should take advantage of the goodwill while it's there. So, what about then why? The why of why we're doing these things. There's essentially three things often said about why do you prosecute people for all these things? Why do you prosecute a 101-year-old man, as they did recently in Germany? Things like this. Unfortunately, there's a lot of very bad reasons that people advance. And usually the people that advance them have absolutely no knowledge of criminology. Now, don't get me wrong, I have no knowledge of criminology. Okay? I have no knowledge of criminology. Nor do I have knowledge of technology. You might have noticed that I was pretty vague about the technological stuff. Okay? The fact of the matter is I was born in 1968. I distinctly remember having to get the 7-year-old brother of an ex-girlfriend out of class to help me upload my thesis when I was graduating. I don't know much about that stuff. I don't know much about criminology, but one thing I know is this, that the deterrent value of the criminal law in and of itself is dramatically overstated. So people often say, international criminal law will stop these things ever happening again. Now, the fact that they happen doesn't mean it doesn't have such an effect, but I think personally that there is very, very little deterrent value in international criminal law. Why? Most of the people, I'm leaving Russia out of this at the moment, who commit these things do so in places where knowledge of the International Criminal Court and of international criminal law is more or less absent. But, and now bringing Russia back into it, these crimes are committed in extraordinary situations which are not rational choice situations. Someone does not think, this is punishable by up to 30 years before the International Criminal Court, when they have been inside a hot metal truck for 12 hours, and then they are let loose in a village after their leader has told them that these people have no culture, okay, and in some cases are not human, where they may be on drugs, and they're certainly scared. Okay? These are not everyday situations. These crimes happen with very strange dynamics. Perhaps some of you know, have studied this, and perhaps some of you might go on to study these things. In other words, I don't think these are rational choice situations in which deterrence really plays a role. And then, of course, we have the opposite of deterrence. We have the ISIS phenomenon or the Putin phenomenon, which is, that's what you say, and it's precisely because you say it that I'm going to do the opposite. So deterrence, I think we can leave out of it. Another thing that's often said is the instructive value, the educative value of prosecuting. Educative for the peoples, the populations whose own people committed the crimes. And they usually look to Germany at the end of the Second World War. And they say, look at Germany now, okay? A model liberal democracy, okay, with war guilt, etc., etc. I think for the peoples who commit, whose own commit these things, the educative value can be there, but only under very specific circumstances. So if I think of my own family in Croatia, as far as they're concerned, many of these war criminals are heroes. You know, I have Serbian friends and so on and so forth. In the former Yugoslavia, okay, no one believes that their own people were involved, except in one situation. What was that? When in Serbia, some Serbs themselves produced videos of killing 300 people. Only then did they decide. As for Germany and Rwanda, very specific circumstances of complete defeat of a nation, or one side completely winning the civil war. In other words, it was victor's justice. And in some ways, to be successful, international criminal law has to be victor's justice. Usually people say, oh no, it's not. It's not victor's justice. It is, and in some ways it has to be. There has to be a top-down campaign from government over decades saying to people, this is what happened and this is what you did. I was struck now, I'm sure some of you are German. I was struck when I first went to Hamburg to see a ruined church and a little sign that said, this is what happens to warmongers. That has not happened in the former Yugoslavia because no one lost. It didn't happen in Japan. They lost terribly. But the Americans did not institute such a campaign because they didn't want to upset the emperor, etc., etc. It's happened in Rwanda because one side won. So far, that's not happening, obviously. And unless and until, and I don't think there will be, and there probably ought not to be, the complete defeat of Russia, because who wants that? Who wants them to end up as Germany ended up? No one. Then I think the educative value will be minimal. Which brings me to my last point. And I was struck when I first heard this word. So I had a friend at Cambridge, Professor Andrew von Hirsch. Maybe you've read some of his stuff. One of the great criminologists. I say a friend. He took me out to lunch once a year to tell me about his sailing trips with an all-female crew, you know, of 25-year-old PhD students. And I didn't want to know. But that was then, this is now. And he used the word retribution, which for me means revenge. But no, apparently it has a very specific meaning in criminology, and this much I know. Retribution is what we would call just deserts. It's an abstract, deontological concept. In other words, whereas before we've been thinking in instrumental terms, deterrence, education, this is to balance the moral scales of justice. And I think that is why we prosecute people. Now think, we're doing it in a way for us in a way, and for the victims, and I come back to this international reaction and to this reaction of private people. There seems to be something deep inside of us which revolts at the sight of these crimes, and some crying out for justice, whatever that may mean. And in human history, it seems that most societies have developed the idea of the criminal law. Not all of them, but most. I come from Australia, where for 60,000 years the Aboriginal people have lived on that continent. They have an exceptionally punitive form of criminal law. It seems in some way to respond to something deep in us which cries out for the balancing of the scales. We know when we're children, we say, "Ma, don't let her get away with it." There seems to be some sense of the universe, the cosmos being out of order when an offense of that nature takes place, and that there has to be some balancing of that. And the way that we've learnt and taught ourselves and developed to do this, rather than shooting people through the head, is to prosecute them and to put them in prison. Some states then shoot them through the head. But the idea of retribution is a moral rebalancing for the victims, and then there's an instrumental value. They don't take the law into their own hands, but for us as well. For us as well. And in some ways, I don't know, I think we're almost not human if something doesn't scream out at us when we see these crimes and say, something has to be done. And that something seems, through the history of humanity, to have been punishment through the criminal law. I'll leave you on that. I wish you congratulations. I'm sorry for taking your time. I'm sure you're thinking, cover, cover, cover. I don't want to stand between you, your piece of paper, your loved ones, and your carver. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. O'Keefe, for your graduation lecture. Now is the time for the speeches by recent graduates, who will address a few words to colleagues, family, friends, and teachers in the name and on behalf of the class of 2022. First of all, let me introduce them to you. Es la hora de los parlamentos de los recién graduados y graduadas, que os dirigirán unas palabras a todos los compañeros, familiares, amigos y profesores en nombre y representación de la promoción 2022. Antes que nada, se las presento. Sandra Márquez Póstigo, del Máster en Criminología y Ejecución Penal. Candelaria Green Merson, del Máster Avanzado en Ciencias Jurídicas. Y Babette de Nayer, from the Master's degree in European and Global Law.
Bona tarda a tots y totes, benvolguts, benvolgudes. Y ahora ya podéis estaros tranquilos, todos aquellos que no hayáis tenido tiempo de aprender catalán, porque hoy no os haré sufrir, así que he preparado el discurso en castellano. Pero sí aprovecho la oportunidad para animaros a que lo estudiéis, sobre todo los que os gustaría quedaros aquí en Cataluña durante un tiempo. Mi nombre es Sandra Márquez y es un verdadero honor para mí tomar la palabra en este día tan especial. Pero antes de seguir, debo haceros una confesión, y es que cuando me dijeron de hablar frente a todos vosotros y dar unas palabras en nombre del Máster de Criminología y Ejecución Penal, me sentí tan nerviosa que pasé días enteros sin poder dormir. Ahora sí, poniéndome más en serio, en primer lugar, felicidades a todos aquellos que hoy nos graduamos y conseguimos una meta más. Dicho esto, quería dedicar este discurso a dar las gracias. Por un lado, agradecer a todos aquellos profesores que mostraron interés en nosotros y en que aprendamos y que han dedicado sus esfuerzos no solo en transmitir los conocimientos, sino en hacer las clases más dinámicas, generando debate, que en mi opinión es como más nos implicamos y aprendemos. También quiero agradecer a Jordina, de Gestión Administrativa, por ser siempre tan atenta y efectiva respondiendo nuestras dudas y mensajes vía email. Evidentemente, también quiero dar las gracias a todos los que nos acompañan, todas las personas que nos acompañan a lo largo de nuestro viaje de constante aprendizaje, ya sean familiares, parejas o amigos, que todos sabemos que sin ellos no llegaríamos tan lejos. Así que muchas gracias a todos los que nos allanan en el camino, nos dan el empujón cuando más lo necesitamos y nos ayudan sin tener que pedirlo cuando más lo necesitamos. Por último, pero no menos importante, felicidades y gracias a todos nosotros que hoy nos graduamos, pero si me permitís, especialmente a los compañeros y amigos que he tenido el placer de conocer gracias a este máster de Criminología, culminando esta mini etapa de nuestro aprendizaje, no solo con un bagaje académico más rico, o al menos eso se supone, sino y sobre todo con nuevas amistades que probablemente mantendremos a lo largo de la vida. Y es que sin duda alguna este máster no sería lo que es si no nos brindara la oportunidad de conocer a personas tan diferentes, no solo de distintas carreras, de criminología, derecho, psicología, sociología, ciencias políticas, educación social, economía y ADE e incluso matemáticas, y espero no haberme dejado ninguna, como decía, no solo de diferentes carreras, sino gente de lugares muy distintos y bien separados geográficamente, que desde luego nos han enriquecido culturalmente como personas. Y espero de corazón que a todos vosotros la criminología os haya despertado interés, o como mínimo que os haya enseñado una nueva forma más amplia y multidisciplinar de analizar y entender los problemas jurídicos sociales, partiendo siempre desde la empatía, pero con rigor científico y sustentado en la evidencia empírica. Así que sin extenderme mucho más, solo un poquito, felicidades a todos vosotros, a todos nosotros que hoy estamos aquí para terminar nuestra maestría y empezar una nueva etapa. Si me permitís el símil, sobre todo para los que entendáis lo que voy a decir, me gustaría terminar mi discurso con las teorías de la transformación cognitiva y del apoyo social que tanto le encantan a nuestro profesor José Cid, pero esta vez no como las claves del desistimiento delictivo, sino del éxito de la vida. La dedicación personal, la motivación y el esfuerzo constantes son claramente requisitos indispensables para conseguir nuestros objetivos, pero en mi opinión, lo que realmente hace que valga la pena son las personas que nos acompañan, nos animan a seguir adelante y que tan sinceramente celebran nuestros logros. Así que rodeémonos de gente tan mágica. Y ahora sí, me despido de vosotros, de nuevo felicitando a todos los que hoy nos graduamos y proponiéndoos que antes de iros a dormir agradezcáis al menos a una de las personas que os ha acompañado durante parte de vuestro viaje y sin la cual no hubierais llegado tan lejos o al menos sin la cual el camino hubiera sido mucho más arduo. Muchas gracias y enhorabuena.
Estimadas autoridades, profesores, compañeros, familia y amigos. Es curioso que cuando las cosas llegan a su fin, el comentario más recurrente es que rápido pasó el tiempo. En mi caso sí fue, y creo que para varios de ustedes también. Cuando llegamos, ya teníamos un camino recorrido y quizás veíamos nuestro paso por la UPF como una herramienta más a la que cada uno de nosotros, de alguna u otra forma, le sacó su provecho para complementar su formación académica. A un año de que comenzamos nuestro máster, estoy segura que esta aventura fue mucho más que una experiencia académica y que hoy todos miramos hacia atrás y vemos cuánto hemos aprendido y crecido durante este tiempo. Porque así es. Estoy segura que todos nosotros inevitablemente crecimos, solo que quizás nos toma un tiempo saber cuánto, porque el conocimiento no se percibe ni se entiende en tan poco tiempo. Tener presente que conocer no es solamente saber datos, ni aprobar exámenes, sino que conocer es tolerar, es escuchar, es conversar, cambiar ideas, saber entenderse. Todas estas virtudes estuvieron presentes en cada una de nuestras clases, que conformadas con alumnos de diferentes partes del mundo, con distintas historias, ideas y visiones, pudimos conocer un poco más de cada uno y de la forma en cómo se desenvuelven en la vida y en las diferencias que nos hacen ser a cada uno quien es. Es por esto que les digo que no tengan miedo a ser diferentes, porque fueron nuestras diferencias las que nos hicieron un gran equipo. Fueron esas diferencias nuestra principal fortaleza, porque cada vez que uno no estuvo, se sintió un vacío por su ausencia. Cada uno fue especial, cada uno es especial. Y si cualquiera de nosotros no hubiera estado presente, entonces nada habría sido lo mismo. Se necesita solidaridad y justicia social, como también libertad, igualdad, orden y seguridad. Y estos valores, presentes en cada uno de nosotros, plasmados en convicciones y corazones, más que en banderas o ideologías, son los que nos ayudarán a cumplir nuestras metas e incluso hacer de este mundo uno mejor. El camino no termina aquí, estamos recién comenzando. Y no es un título lo que nos hará más importantes o grandes en la vida, es el convencimiento de tener un proyecto y luchar hasta conseguirlo. Es la perseverancia, la tolerancia, la confianza con la que llevamos nuestros sueños y la pasión con la que lo llevemos a cabo lo que nos hará encontrarnos el día de mañana y decir, cumplimos, porque podemos y porque debemos, porque la vida nos hizo encontrarnos, conocernos, querernos y tenemos que devolver lo que se nos ha regalado. Finalmente, quiero agradecer a todos los profesores por todo lo que nos enseñaron durante este año, por la paciencia y el compromiso, pero sobre todo por demostrarnos lo felices que eran realizando su labor. A mis compañeros, por enseñarme sus ideas y mostrarme un poco de la cultura de cada uno de ustedes. Abrirme los ojos frente a otras maneras de mirar la vida que seguro me servirán en el futuro. Por último, a mis amigos, a los que estuvieron siempre durante todo este proceso, ya sea con un consejo, con risas, con los apuntes y explicaciones de clases o con las cañas después de un largo día de estudio. A esas personas que uno veía tan distintas a uno, pero que al final terminan siendo tu familia en un país ajeno que nos recibió como si fuera propio y se transformó en nuestro hogar. Les deseo el mejor de los éxitos a todos y a cada uno de ustedes. Que este sea un nuevo paso en el largo camino que deseamos recorrer y logremos nuestros sueños y metas en esta nueva vida donde espero que nos volvamos a encontrar. Muchas gracias y buena suerte.
Class of 2022, I am going to be honest. This has been the peak of our lives. It's all downhill from here. Last time I was giving a graduation speech, I was fresh out of high school and excited to go study law in the big capital. I don't know about you, but I still vividly remember the eagerness to leave my small school and become a proper grown-up. Soon I would learn being an adult meant eating pasta pesto 4 times a week as a midnight snack to neutralize the upcoming hangover. But yes, finally, we no longer had to suffer through calculus on a Friday afternoon. So when 18-year-old me had to give a speech in front of our high school peers, I used Sinatra's words to end it. Class of 2016, the best is yet to come. I think I got it right, didn't I? As I stand here again today, these words feel less appropriate. Some of us are enjoying their last student summer before starting their careers. Others can now add another master's degree to their resume of many years of professional experience. But we both came here with 2 things in mind. To learn, yes, but also to have a very good time. It feels like yesterday that we were sitting here for the first time. Professor Ibanez warned us that the year would go by in a blink. He reminded us to get a head start on the thesis. We would want to enjoy the Mediterranean summer after all. Some of us did. Others who were out there submitting the thesis on June 17, 11:50 p.m., I saw you and I felt your pain. He also told us what a diverse group of people we were and what an excellent learning environment this is. He was right. Yet, I never expected to study a master's in Barcelona with more Scottish than Catalan citizens. Not only our nationalities were manifold, our preceding academic degrees as well. Not all of us had a law background, as some like to say in class before answering. Even though we did spend a fair amount of our time in the Ciutadella library, battling not just upcoming papers, but also that horrible smell, I did like to think that we took Professor Ibanez's advice and got the most out of this year. Not just did we get an LLM at one of Spain's best universities, we also got to live in one of the greatest cities Europe has to offer. When I imagine my fellow students discovering Barcelona, I imagine you organizing barbecues and playing volleyball on the beach, or guitar at Plaza del Sol. I see you clubbing in Eixample and sneaking into hotel pools. I see you traveling the country and coming back to your favorite bookstore in Gracia. I also see you crying in front of some Spanish funcionario who refuses to give you your NIE without a cita previa. But then you're forgetting about it quickly by ordering some tapas, then cañas, then some more. I see you slightly hungover on your way to class, complaining about the cafeteria coffee. And to those of you who got to call this city their home long before the start of the academic year, I see you guiding a bunch of guiris around town. I want to thank you for welcoming us, for teaching us your ways and recommending us the places to be. Although just a small piece of advice, maybe next time you say you should go check out El Ricón, maybe add a trigger warning. Whatever this city or UPF had to offer for you, I hope you took it all in. I hope you got not just what you were looking for, but what you thought you didn't need. Reflecting on this year, we can look at it both ways. On the one hand, maybe this was our last year of being this careless and free, exploring a big city. Maybe from now on, it's all taxes and mortgages and working for promotions and living for the weekend. But on the other hand, the you of 6 years ago could have probably never imagined yourself sitting here today, in the Spanish sun, melting away with one master's degree hotter. There are opportunities out there beyond your wildest imaginations. There are vacations to be booked and dream jobs to apply for. Some of your favorite songs still have to be recorded. Some of your favorite books have yet to be written. You're going to discover new hobbies and weird talents. There are nights out with friends that haven't been planned yet. And the best part is, you'll finally be able to actually afford it. There are people out there who you are going to love and we are going to love you, and you haven't even met them all. Yes, from now on there are mistakes, thunderstorms, and struggles, but let's not forget about the adventures, sunshine, and wisdom ahead. So call me an over-optimist, but I guess what I really want to say to you is, class of 2022, the best is yet to come. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Sandra, Candelaria, and Babette for these words. And now is the time you've all been waiting for. the delivery of the Commemorative Diplomas to graduates of the class of 2022 of the Master's degree in Law. Y ahora llega el momento que todos estábamos esperando. A continuación, serán entregados los diplomas conmemorativos a los graduados y graduadas de la promoción 2022 de los Másters en Derecho. Por este motivo, pedimos que suban al escenario a la doctora Elena Larrauri, coordinadora del Máster en Criminología y Ejecución Penal, a la doctora Yael Caral, coordinadora del Máster Avanzado en Ciencias Jurídicas, y por último al doctor Josep Ibáñez, coordinador del Máster en European and Global Law. Y ahora que ya tenemos a las autoridades preparadas, empezaremos por los graduados y graduadas del Máster en Criminología y Ejecución Penal. Alba Aroca Montoya. Un fuerte aplauso, por favor. Silvana Avendaño Bedoya. María Luisa Bonet Carbonell. María Cristina Bob. Ariadna Calero Cutanda. Cristian Alexander Cerna Rabines. Carles Dios Fillat. Julia Duch Clerici. Alex Escalas Rubio. Albert Fernández Farrés. Josefina Galazzi. Nadine García de Paredes. Eva Gómez Conca. Juan Camilo Gómez González. José Pablo Guerra Acevedo. Noelia Julia Redondo. Linda Olivia Kalinen. Sandra Márquez Póstigo. Noelia Martínez Campos. Ilan Alejandro Modles Eskenazi. Pablo Nuin Verdún. Ana Pavón Mateo. Alba Fabiana Roca Monje Guardia. Albert Rudés y Martín. Y Alicia Santos Paniagua. Seguimos ahora con los graduados y graduadas del Máster Avanzado en Ciencias Jurídicas. Llamamos al escenario a recoger su diploma y también un fuerte aplauso del público para Lucía Aguerre Caces. Carlos Nahuel Álvarez Bachter. Jesús Barahona Martín. Stephanie Helen Betroni. María Emilia Borgonovo Sapino. Lina Callejas Ramírez. Matías Felipe Carrasco Silva. Nasif Chemes Acuña. María Andrea Correa Pinzón. María Gerbolés López. María José Gil Ojeda. Candelaria Green Merson. Marcos Guillermo Guggiari. Enrique Javier Gijón Márquez de la Plata. Joaquín Liu. Roger Marçal Portella. Paul Olige García. Eduard Paredes Lázaro. María Agostina Pasera. Rocío María Alejandra Pedraza. Isabela Saavedra Villejas. María Camila Serna Yepes. Diego Ignacio Serrano Dote. Martín Sokol. Alexander Christopher Tembrick Berentel. Miquel Tucho Morillo. Y Carlos Ignacio Uay Quirós. And finally, we will present the commemorative diplomas to the graduates of the master's degree in European and Global Law. Sisplau, un fort aplaudiment per Maria Alberich Navarrete. Gemma Alborg Nadal. Julius Azzola. Melissa Bell Romero. Félix Brich. Beiza Zengis. Isadora Lemos Zeni. Sarah Cowie. Babette Denayer. Ana de Beciana Vila. Kirsty Fairhurst. Elodie Fernández. Ana Girván. Martín Grau Dávila. Julia Hausleitner. Hortal Isaac. Valentín Kobosen. Pinar Aileen Masi. Mauro Alfredo Meloni. Sydney Osteen. Luis Pérez Galcerán. Julián Agustín Quiñones Reyes. Leonard Alexander Schott Stromberg. Ina Ziegemann. Arda Sorgus. Mariami Zitkava. Eve Elizabeth Thompson. Joan Villuslada Camps. Rachel Mary Wise. Armin Zargami. And finally, Sanjita Soto Torres. Un fuerte aplauso, por favor, para todos ellos. Y hasta aquí la entrega de diplomas conmemorativos a todos los graduados y graduadas. Agradecemos especialmente la presencia de la doctora Elena Larrauri, coordinadora del Máster en Criminología y Ejecución Penal, a la doctora Jael Caral, coordinadora del Máster Avanzado en Ciencias Jurídicas, y al doctor Josep Ibáñez, coordinador del Máster en European and Global Law. De nuevo, solicitamos la presencia del doctor Ángel Rodrigo, director del Departamento de Derecho de la Universitat Pompeu Fabra.
Antes de cerrar este acto, me gustaría transmitir dos mensajes de una manera muy breve. Ahora, vosotros sois alumni Pompeu Fabra y en esa condición nos gustaría que sintierais el orgullo de pertenecer a esta comunidad universitaria. Habéis compartido una experiencia universitaria en Barcelona, en la Pompeu Fabra, lo habéis hecho con éxito, os felicitamos y creemos que debéis estar orgullosos de vuestra experiencia y de formar parte de esta comunidad universitaria. Sois alumni UPF. Y el segundo mensaje que os quería transmitir es una petición, que seáis nuestros embajadores. Cuando volváis a vuestros lugares de origen, estén en Cataluña, en España, en Europa, en América, en Asia o en cualquier otro lugar, que les contéis a vuestros amigos, a vuestros familiares, a vuestros conocidos, que habéis estudiado un máster, en la Universidad Pompeu Fabra y que probablemente es la mejor universidad catalana y española. Os pedimos, por tanto, que seáis nuestros embajadores. Gracias por vuestra participación. Before closing this ceremony, I would like to send two messages. Now you are alumni UPF. We would like you to feel this condition as a pride of belonging of this Universitarian community. You have shared this university experience in Barcelona at the Pompeu Fabra University. You have done successfully. We congratulate you and believe that you should be proud of your experience and to being part of this community. And then, a request that you be our ambassadors. When you return to your place of origin, whether in Catalonia, Spain, Europe, America, Asia, and others, tell your friends and family that you have studied your master's degree, probably in the best Catalan and Spanish university. We demand you to be our ambassadors. Thank you for your participation.
Bien, este acto ya finaliza. La Universidad Pompeu Fabra os agradece vuestra asistencia, de manera especial a quienes han sido sus protagonistas, los graduados y graduadas. Nos despedimos también de los familiares, amigos y miembros de la comunidad universitaria que nos han seguido a través de Internet. Finalizaremos el acto con el himno universitario, el Gaudeamus Igitur, que interpretará el coro de la UPF, dirigido por Aida Vera. Cuando termine, estáis invitados, como no podría ser de otra forma, a una copa de cava para celebrar vuestra nueva condición de alumni de la Universitat Pompeu Fabra. Well, this ceremony has come to an end. Pompeu Fabra University is grateful for your attendance, especially to our protagonists, the graduates. We also say goodbye to family and friends and the members of the university community who have followed us on the internet. We will end this ceremony with the university anthem, Gaudeamus Igitur, which will be performed by the UPF choir, conducted by Aida Vera. And after the anthem, you are invited to a glass of cava to celebrate your new status as alumni of Pompeu Fabra University. Ara sí, hem arribat al final. Benvinguts a la comunitat alumni, que és un vincle que dura per sempre. Gaudeamus Igitur.
Penal.